and I'll drag you over to the screen.
Okay. All right, great. Now we're live. So CPPCon is going to go virtual this year. So we are working out with the Gaylord about the next future years, but unfortunately this year with all this madness, we can't. We're trying to protect the health and safety of our attendees. So we decided that we're going to go virtual. And if you look at the website cppcon.org going virtual, you can get some information about the what's going to happen and the pricing that we are going to be charging for this year's event. We are going to be using Remo, which is basically going to be like a bunch of tables in a room, and where you sit, you can chat with your local people at the table, as well as chat with the presentation, the moderator to present to the presenter so that they can answer questions. We will need volunteers because it will be an event where the moderator needs to just let the people know, hey, it's almost time to finish the session, as well as take the questions and ask them to the presenter. It will start the same. It will be the same week in September 16th through the 20th, and we will have classes, instruction classes at the beginning and end of the week. But during the week, during CPPCon, we will start at 0800 Pacific time, and we will have 4 60-minute sessions in 5.5 hours, which will include 1 keynote and 3 one-hour sessions with a number of tracks that maybe vary, I believe, up to 6. So if you want to volunteer, we still need you. We will be having moderators across the globe, hopefully, so that after the presentations have been given, we can rebroadcast those sessions, and any questions they can also take to the moderator to answer within a 24-hour period. So we'll probably re-show the day's presentation 3 times in one day. Okay. The next thing that I wanted to talk about was the tip of the month. I know that we had some confusion from last meeting, but basically it's a 5 to 10 minute discussion that could be an idea, a tip, or even a topic that the presenter may have some difficulties in understanding and wants to discuss how to get a solution. For example, what is the best repository to use to do code reviews? There. It can also be, something that topic that is a little bit controversial in the sense that, why do I want to use exceptions? Things like that. If there's an idea that they want to discuss and we don't have time to do it during our normal regular meeting, I would be willing to put it into a blog and advertise that so that people can add comments to help assist in solving a problem. And right now, if you would like to do that, you can contact me at my email address, brett.searles@autobotics.net. We will be creating an email that will be NWCPP specific, and once the website is updated, then we will go forward. And that's it for that. So is anybody else online?
Looks like we have about 6 of us at the moment. So
probably everybody went out of town.
yeah, it's a hot day today too. So
Yeah.
okay, we can hold for a couple more minutes and see if anybody else shows up, and then just jump in.
Okay.
This presentation isn't super long, so we've got a little bit of time. Oh, Brett, what's the process if you want to volunteer for CPPCon? Is it the same as last year, or will there be something coming out for that?
We haven't finalized that. We definitely don't need grant applications.
Don't need travel.
Don't need travel. But I think that will, and plus it's just during, or it's only 5 hours in the morning, basically. So, or at least our time. So it won't be like multiple, shifts. So, but we will probably need 6 to 7 volunteers per quote unquote shift. There is going to be shifts because we're rebroadcasting the presentation that same day, but you can be in India and do it for like the early morning our time, evening their time, or daytime their time. So it's not like you have to say, I want this shift, I want that shift. I think if you come from India, we know, well, you're going to have this shift. I mean, you never know. But yeah, we'll probably have people from Europe do like a midday our time rebroadcast, and then people in Asia or Moscow do a later shift. So, so yes, we will need to find out what time of day you can do it. But like I said, once you're in there, it's just going to be 4 sessions. You'll probably have 3 of them, and we need 6 people per shift. So, but if you want to, join in the comments and add, answers or something, start a discussion, you can also do that. So it's open, but the main basic minimum is 6.
Okay. Thanks, Brett.
Sure.
Let's see. Okay. Well, shall we go ahead and start the meeting?
There's some more people.
Oh, there's a few more. Wow, a whole bunch just showed up. Okay, maybe we should wait for another minute or two. We got 9 now, 10.
Oh, there's Peter.
Yeah.
We were talking about you, Peter.
A couple of minutes. Maybe the internet traffic is bad.
I got 100 megabaud. Come on.
It's not bad. Do you ever use it?
Yeah, I got stuck in traffic.
Well, the problem is the router. It was actually constricting them. So we got a 1 gig router. Now it's been pretty good.
Oh, yeah.
So.
Yeah, give people a couple more minutes.
Oh, all right.
So, folks, go ahead and open up, for folks online, go ahead and open up your chat window. So I'm the speaker tonight, and basically I'll just kind of keep an eye on the chat window, and that's how I'll be taking questions. You guys have probably mostly seen me speak before. I kind of like an interactive session, so if there's anything you want to say, just throw it in the chat window. I'll repeat it, and off we go from there.
All right. Well, I'll talk to you later, guys.
Okay, see ya. Thanks, Brett.
Karate. Yeah, see ya.
Except the chat window disappears when I share my screen. So tell you what, lovely. So if there's a question, I'll pause at the end of each slide and just unmute your mic and chime in. So anyway, I'm Lloyd Moore. Most of you know me. I've been working with the club for probably almost a decade now. 30 years of experience professionally doing industrial automation, robotics, and I'm currently in an aerospace role. In any case, tonight I'd like to talk about the culture of code reviews. This is something I've been running into a lot lately, and particularly being in aerospace. The primary metric there is high quality code, not getting it out the door fast, not being cute, not having fancy graphics, although some people do that. The main point is high quality code. So I've been running into code review issues quite a bit over the last couple of years, and I thought it would make a good talk. So with that, we'll dive in. There we go. So tonight I'd like to talk about what the purpose of a code review is. And just in general, you guys know that code reviews can be a little bit of a controversial topic in some ways, mostly because they take a lot of time. At least that's there's two general pushbacks I hear on code reviews, against doing code reviews. One is, well, it takes too much time. And the second one is there's a cultural dynamic that can get established with code reviews that some people don't like. We'll leave it at that. So I'd like to talk about all those things tonight. Incorporating automation, basically one of the mechanisms for speeding up a code review. What to look for, you could do a whole session on this. I'm just going to touch briefly on it. And then the next three topics are dealing with the culture around doing a code review and how do you manage the team culture to make the code review process more appealing to everybody, fun, enjoyable, and educational. So essentially dealing with the second pushback I typically hear for code reviews. So what is the purpose of a code review? And by the way, if you ever land in one of my interviews, this is one of my interview questions. The fields I tend to work in are generally high quality. Code reviews are generally required. And we want to make that, good for everybody. So there's several answers to this. And, if you're interviewing with me, I'll take a whole bunch of them. But the main ones I really look for are catching bugs early and improving the code quality. So to the argument that code reviews take more time, yes, they generally take more time in the development or the coding phase. But if you're catching bugs early and you're eliminating those bugs, you save much more time on the back end than you spend on the front end because you don't have nearly as much debugging to do. When you do run into a bug, the code quality is typically higher, and that makes debugging much easier. It makes maintenance easier. It makes the code base more sustainable. The next topic I typically look for is something about promoting team learning and team cohesion in the code base. So the first benefit was a benefit to the code. The second benefit is a benefit to the team. Essentially, when you've got a team of people, everybody has their own coding style, and everybody tends to do tends to code things their own way. If you're working on an individual project, that's great. If you're working on a team project, that doesn't tend to help you as much. You end up with a code base that looks like, well, it was written by X number of different people. And again, it makes the code harder for somebody to learn, harder to maintain, and harder to carry forward. So by doing code reviews, the team, and this isn't anything that you have to enforce per se, the team will naturally grow toward a common coding style. And then finally, grow as a developer. Especially with the the rate that languages are changing now, I'm not aware of anybody that knows every feature of every language anymore. If you happen to go to CPPCon, for example, and talk to the people on the ISO standards body, they all know their little individual areas, and they'll be the first to say, yeah, I'm not familiar with X area, if you happen to get into it. So the benefit to the individual in doing code reviews is you get to learn stuff. Yeah, go ahead. Oh, thought I had a question. Okay. So anyway, it's a way that you can teach and learn from your coworkers, and code reviews provide a context for that. So automating the code reviews. One of the things I typically find when a team starts doing code reviews is they get hung up on coding style. Where do my curly braces go? Do I put a space here? What's the right character line length? How long should a function be? Do I use, how do I break a line? There's a plethora of these coding style issues. What I've found is all of these coding styles in issues should be in your coding guidelines and reviewed by automation. In other words, humans are really not good at this. So let the automation do it. This is extremely simple for automation to do at this point. C++ has some options. Other languages are better. I've been doing some work in Python lately. It's really good at this with the pip8 and flake8 analyzers. C++ has Clang format. That's a really good choice. There's also CPP-lint, which will catch certain patterns and anti-patterns as well. And I've actually seen teams do custom development of custom tools to enforce the coding guidelines. Basically, just pick the tool that best matches your coding guidelines. I'd actually go the other way around for certain things. Pick your tool first, and then just set your coding guidelines based on that, if that's possible. Furthermore, the tool should be integrated into the IDE or editor. This is very common now. And so essentially you'll see one of two things happen. Your IDE will simply highlight coding style issues right on the screen as you're typing them. This goes to the first point of catching bugs and issues early. Or in the case of some of the custom tools I've seen, and I believe Clang format does this as well, it will just simply reformat your code for you at the end. That all works really, really nicely. Any questions before I go on to the next slide? Okay. There's also various linters and static analysis tools. Whoops, I should have mentioned Clang Tidy in the first one. I've got Clang Tidy and Clang format somewhat swapped. Clang Tidy is their linter, excuse me. There's also Coverity, PVS Studio, and CPP-lint. These are all static analyzing tools. They will look for patterns, anti-patterns, common coding errors, and so forth. And again, the idea is get this simple stuff out of the way. Let the automation handle it. That lets the human look for architectural issues, coding domain issues, and so forth. Basically, the things the human is good at. So what should you look for? Each language has its own pitfalls. So this is a C++ group. Everybody pretty well in here knows C++'s pitfalls. Other languages have their own pitfalls. I'll pick on Python for a moment since I've already mentioned it. It's essentially a dynamically typed language. Getting the wrong type in the wrong place is fairly easy to do there. Current versions have some help for that as well, but it's one of the pitfalls of that language. Each development domain also has its own pitfalls. If you're working in like a video game environment, various things you want to be looking for are efficiency issues, performance issues, glitchy type issues, edge cases on the graphics, things like that. In aerospace, for instance, that's very, very different. Performance can be an issue, but it's generally not as much. The code turns out to be fairly straightforward. But the types of things you want to look for in that are traceability of your requirements. Where did your constants come from? Does your code match the requirement? Is there holes in the code? Are there safety issues in the code? So any particular development domain you go into is going to have its own special thing that you really want to be focusing your code review on. Each team is going to have their own pitfalls. We're all individual coders. We all have our strengths and weaknesses. I once worked with a person one time who had the benefit of working with an arbitrary precision math library for his entire career. I was spending more time catching divide by zero errors because it would truncate or round to zero. Just as an example. If you look for these first, they're going to be easy to spot. Someone on the team's probably already seen it and gotten burned by it. And over time, you'll just know to start looking for these things with your group. Questions before I go on? Okay, more of what to look for. Does the code implement the specification? This implies there is a specification. Sometimes there is, sometimes there isn't. Related to the specification, does it only implement the specification? So in some coding domains, if you add something extra, it's not a big deal. In an aerospace or a safety critical application, if you add something extra, that means it needs to be tested. It's not in the specification and it shouldn't be there. So in addition to looking for things that there. Is the code readable? This is a pretty obvious one. Do the comments line up with the code? Did somebody change the code and not change the comment, or vice versa? Is the code efficient for the task being performed? Is the code testable? Okay, I could do a whole presentation on just this type of, what to look for, how to look for it, but there's a fair amount of that out there. Any questions or comments on kind of the mechanics of doing the actual code review at this point? Okay, so what I want to move on to next is the team dynamics of doing code review. So this is more of the mushy human stuff, not the technical mechanical stuff. And it turns out this is actually a very important part of getting good code reviews done. You need a team that functions well together, has the team's interest at heart, and essentially they want to cooperate. So in my experience, most of the code review pain comes from the result of poor team dynamics. People don't want to get along, they don't want to cooperate with one another, or they're just not trying to do code reviews. You want the code review to be managed as a cooperative activity. A code review is not the place for somebody to show off how smart they are, how cute they are, berate or another coworker. These are the types of things that if you're a manager in a team and conducting the code review, you want to clamp down on that immediately. There's not good team dynamics to begin with, and it's one of the things that really puts people off from doing code reviews, because you bring the emotional response into the code review and it quits becoming a professional technical activity and becomes a, another type of dynamic which is not as productive. The goal that you want to be driving in a code review is to produce the best possible product and team. So, as I mentioned earlier, you're trying to improve the quality of the product, but this is also a team benefit. There's definite benefits to the team and the individual from doing code reviews. And driving the code review process with that mentality is a key to really getting a team engaged in doing code reviews. So I've actually seen this in a code review. Comments can only be directed at specific code. And as if you're leading a code review, you want to enforce this very strictly. The discussion is about the code. It's not about the person. It's not about anything other than the technical aspects. I've actually had a person say this code sucks. No, not acceptable. Why does this code suck? And better yet, what is specifically wrong with it? And going to my next bullet point, any controversial item. So some things like, hey, there's a pointer error here or a null pointer dereference here. That's not controversial. That's just a bug. Go fix it. Some things, as a matter of practice, are controversial. Well, should we use algorithm A or algorithm B? Should we use approach A or approach B? Whenever possible, back that up with a best practice citation or a research reference. So yeah, that means your code review is going to take a little more time. And sometimes you will actually have to go look up some research. What is the best practice? For instance, there's the CPP core guidelines. If you can take a quote right out of that, and assuming your team has accepted the core guidelines as a best practice, you can say, this code does not align with this best practice. And it's no longer somebody's opinion of which way should we do it. It's just, we've decided as a team we're going to do it this way. Go do it. When you cannot cite a particular best practice or reference, then the team needs to make a decision. And I found it very beneficial to actually document those items. So right along with our coding standards, and these don't necessarily need to be incorporated into them. Sometimes you will. But you'll have a wiki page that's like, okay, we've decided in the past that we're going to do this. And should the comment come up again, you at least know what you decided the first time. If possible, you should always show an alternative approach. So if you're saying, it would be preferable to do task X this way because, well, show what this way is. So you've done two things. One, you've said, this is the way I think we should do it, and here's why you should do it. That also cuts down on round trips between the developer and the code reviewer, because not everybody uses exactly the same terminology, and not everybody has exactly the same coding paradigms that they're used to and that they communicate about. So if you've got an example in there, it just doesn't even have to be real code, just quick pseudocode. That goes a long way to carrying the point. Okay, questions on team dynamics? Oh, there's some more team dynamics. Sometimes you're going to get to a point where there really is no clear answer. I've seen this handled a couple of ways. Basically, the mentality is, if you can't come to a consensus as a team within a certain amount of time, and I've seen that time range anywhere from 5 minutes to 30 minutes, then the general feeling is you really don't know enough for sure to say which way is correct, or there just simply may not be a clear answer. Many of these things you'll find by the time you get to this stage end up being people's opinions or just the way they've done it their entire career, and you don't have a solid scientific reference for saying this is the way to do it. As a team lead, this is where you really need to step in and say, okay, we're just going to do it this way. So when you get to this stage, it's the team's job to implement and respect the determination of the lead. On the counterpoint to that, if there's not enough evidence to determine the proper path without the lead having to make a decision, then it also probably isn't that important. And if you do make the wrong decision, fine, correct it, and then document it. So the next time you come to this, you won't have a problem, or you won't enter the conversation again. Okay. Questions before I go on? Okay. Ultimately, the team dynamic that you want to create needs to match the type of development that you're doing. I've worked in quite a few different areas. We talked a little bit about aerospace versus video games a minute ago. I'm loving the examples between those two dynamics. They are almost completely opposite each other in so many ways. It makes for a very good discussion. There's other types. Research teams are going to have a different dynamic than production teams. If you're doing pure research, the assumption that you want to build maintainable code actually kind of goes out the window. If you're doing pure research, at least the teams I've worked on doing that, you're throwing code away at a pretty regular rate. So it becomes more important, is the code readable? Does the code implement what you're trying to do? Does it cover edge cases and answer the research questions you're looking at, so forth. We talked about video games versus safety critical software. I found that pretty entertaining. Embedded systems development will have a different focus than web development, typically around resource utilization. Embedded systems are quite constrained, and while you still want your web servers and websites to be efficient, they're not nearly as constrained as a typical embedded system. So web development may be, I haven't done a ton of it, but I'll venture to say more around performance, load balancing, serving multiple people or multiple simultaneous requests. Embedded systems is going to be tending to focus more on resource utilization, power consumption, things of that nature. So each group is going to have different things they're going to look for, and you need to match that to your group. One of the easiest ways to get a good team dynamic for doing code reviews is to just hire people who do code reviews. If you have the benefit of building up a team from scratch, you can set the team dynamic right when you hire the team by asking the right interview questions. I've done this. Works reasonably well. As I got more proficient at it, it got much better. I found the more I incorporated questions into my interviews about how does the candidate feel about doing code reviews, what do they look for, I had a much easier time on the team actually managing and getting people to do code reviews. Some people are adverse to code reviews, specifically because of bad experiences in the past. The interview questions, you kind of want to focus on that and dig it out. The candidate, you really want to be at least amiable to doing code reviews and the team dynamic you're trying to create. Okay, questions? Okay, so the next set of slides, I'm just going to tell you a few of the questions I use for doing or for interviewing candidates to see what they or how they feel about doing a code review and what they do with a code review. The first one we've already talked about a little bit. What's the purpose of a code review? Catching bugs early, team cohesiveness, code-based cohesiveness, learning and growing as a developer. Of course, there's other answers that are perfectly acceptable. Those are the 3 to 4 that I typically look for and do here. What you want the candidate to be able to do is to communicate the value of the code review to the project, the team, and themselves. And that last one usually does not get said. So if you get somebody who understands the value of doing a code review to themselves, that's a really big plus. I would not discount somebody or not hire somebody because they didn't mention that one. But they should give you a sense that they see value in doing code reviews and where that value lies. I did have one person in an interview one time tell me, I don't do code reviews. This was a mission critical project. Code reviews were mandatory. Okay, might have been an excellent coder, but that was not going to be a good team fit. So, okay, next question. What do you look for in a code review?
May I ask a question?
Yes.
So earlier you mentioned people with bad code review experiences.
Uh-huh.
Do you have examples of bad past experience from either you or people you have talked with?
Yeah. So generally what I've seen, and I've experienced a bit, not severely, mostly because a lot of the groups I work with don't do code reviews. I was going to mention that earlier. One of the reasons I wanted to do this talk is because most of the teams I work with, I'm the person introducing code reviews to the team, which in this day and age is a little scary, and given some of the projects I was doing was even a little more scary. I have had some that had done great code reviews, though. What I find typically in the nature of bad experiences is when you have a team that operates in a competitive mode. In other words, the team members are, for one reason or another, trying to outcompete their coworkers. The code review process does not work well in that environment. It becomes a vehicle for one person to basically show up or beat up or insult another coworker. That team dynamic, I've found, does not go well with code reviews. You end up with one person or one small group of people becoming dominant, and it becomes essentially a power game instead of a technical code review. That you really want to put an end to as quickly as you can. People who have experienced that, I find, develop the impression that's what a code review is about, and that's just simply a wrong view. Sometimes you can help people get out of that, sometimes you can't.
I've also experienced that with in school with robotics. We do code reviews, or we've started to do code reviews. And I think that at least when it started was a big part where it feels almost like the code review is directed at people instead of code. And I think it's really important to have that be the latter and not the former.
Yeah, exactly. And to my point, the code review must always be about the code and technical issues, nothing else. And if you're leading a code review, it becomes your job as the leader to set and enforce that boundary.
Thank you.
Yep. Okay, so what do you look for in a code review? This is a really open-ended question. As an interviewer, I tend to like open-ended questions because I get more interesting responses. And this is going to tell you a couple things about the candidate. One is their experience. So more junior candidates who probably have not done a lot of code reviews will answer this one way and at one level. A very senior engineer will answer it in a very different way. So in addition to giving you information about how the candidate perceives a code review, it'll tell you the level of experience of that candidate as well. Essentially what I'm looking for is, does the candidate have a list of things they typically look for, and is it reasonable? In all honesty, I kind of don't care what that list is. That list is going to be developed by their past experience, what type of group they were working with, what type of project they were working on. And as long as they have something they look for and something they find productive, good enough in my mind, and that, you know, their list will adapt, you know, as needed. If the only things they list are spelling and comments, very, very surface level, you know, or how many lines of code is in a function, you know, stuff like that. If it's very surface level, that's a warning sign they don't really know how to look at their own code as well. So, you know, in addition to getting a feel for their coding review process, you're getting a feel for how they code with this question. Okay. Sorry, folks, that's my cat. You can hear him. Okay. So this is an interesting question. I'm going to give credit to Jeff Gold for this one. He's a person I worked with who is very senior. He came up with this one, and I love it. The trick with this question is when you present this question to the candidate, you want to do it in a challenging way. You want to do it, so the question is fundamentally, what do you do if you're short on time and your manager asks you to skip the code review? You are essentially challenging the candidate to challenge their manager. And this was actually, I thought, a little controversial when we first started doing it. And after we did it for a little while, it was very, very revealing. When you present this to the candidate, you want to say it in a challenging way. You want to evoke a little bit of an emotional response or defensive response in the candidate. And what you're looking for in the answer is a balance. You want to show, you want the candidate to show that they can balance the competing priorities of time and quality and balance the assertion of challenging the manager. This will somewhat depend on what type of a manager you have and what type of a manager you are. Some managers kind of like, just do it my way and that's that. I find better managers actually want to know if they're doing something wrong. So if what you want the candidate to do, and this again, like I was saying, kind of needs to line up with the way you want your priority to be as a manager. I particularly like, you know, people I'm managing and even people I'm not managing to challenge me if I'm about to do something stupid. So I want them in this particular question to say, hey, you know, I get that, you know, we're short on time, but here's why I think we should continue doing code reviews. I want them to show some conviction to code review. I want them to show a conviction to doing a proper and a high quality process. And that, if you get that on a team, you've got a high quality team. It's self-reinforcing. The best answers will actually show an understanding that the code review saves time. So when you're challenged on, you know, we're short on time, having a response that says we're going to lose more time if we don't spend it this way is essentially what you're trying to find. You know, see if they understand that and can balance that and say it in a good way. The worst answers typically involve the candidate becoming directly argumentative. I've had that one once. Or completely passive. It's like, okay, no problem, we'll just drop the code reviews. So either of those two extremes, you know, I consider a weak answer. Something where it becomes a discussion, they can point out the benefit of the code review, they can cite research that says code reviews save time. that's the type of answer I'm looking for in this particular type of question. And you do get it occasionally. It's rare, but you do get it. I've actually had 2 candidates give dead-on answers to that. So, okay, questions before I go on? Okay, well, that's great if you're hiring a team. What if you already have one? So we've all been on teams. Every team has its own culture. Sometimes it's grown deliberately. Sometimes it just kind of happens. If you're trying to change a team's culture with respect to code reviews, you're basically going to have to go more slowly and incrementally. Change is hard. Change takes time. What I've found is if you can do the code review and start them in a way that is almost an educational exercise. This is how we learn some code. And I've had these done as code inspections, where you'll typically have one person who's an expert in part of the code base. Just have that person present that part of the code base to the rest of the team. Don't even necessarily call it a code review. It's we're teaching the team, this is our code base, broadening our horizons. Many times that will naturally roll into a code review. And you don't even have to call it one. Like, hey, what about this edge case? I see how that works, but if X is 2, that doesn't work. Oh, okay, I'll go fix that. You just did the same thing as a code review. It's also a good point, a good area where people can start talking about different approaches to solving a problem. As folks get more comfortable with this, it'll tend to turn into a code review by itself. And you don't even necessarily have to call them that. Once people see the benefit of it and they get over kind of the emotional reaction to the word code review, it'll take on a life of its own. Questions on that? Okay. So, go ahead.
Yeah. So, I just wanted to bring up a point that even if it's the same team, even if we have a team, at one point of time, not everyone might be working on the same project or same code or same work. So if that is the case, then having people from your team or other team do code reviews for an altogether new thing becomes a bit challenging.
Yeah. You're essentially describing the individual coder scenario, and I've run into that a lot actually as well. I think to that point, it depends on how separate the code bases really are. If they're totally separate things, yeah, it's going to become challenging. If the things are somehow related, like they're 2 separate programs that have to talk to each other, there's still some opportunity there to do code reviews. If they're in different languages, and I run into this a lot, I'm starting to work on teams that are using multiple languages, then it becomes a little bit harder because you're generally not an expert in the language or the language dynamics, I should say, of what the other person is doing. So yeah, in that case, you do need a couple of people, at least 2, to do a code review.
That's the reason this Friday only, I'm doing a knowledge transfer session for my team so that they can review my code. So yeah.
Now to that end, in the cases where I've been a single coder, it's almost exclusively been in small companies where you just don't have enough people. Usually when you get into a bigger company, they want and you should have a backup for every single person on your team. So if Joe, gets abducted by aliens, you have a way to cover for him. I'm hearing another question. Nope. Okay. So anyway, to your point, yeah, the knowledge transfer is a good mechanism as well.
Yeah.
Okay, so managing conflict. Inevitably, this is going to come up. Every developer has a different way of doing things. It's going to come out in code reviews. The trick is, how does it come out? Does it come out constructively or destructively? And it's the team lead's job to make sure it comes out constructively. I have yet to run into a case where a good technical discussion led to a bad result. I have run into cases where a technical discussion devolved into a personal issue, and that leads to a bad result. So again, we've mentioned this a couple times already. Keep it to the technical aspects. Key principles. Drive for technical correctness. This is easy to defend. If it's wrong, if it's technically wrong, it's wrong. And there's multiple ways to show it. You know, it's like, hey, this isn't going to pass the compiler. Okay, the compiler blows up. You know, that's pretty easy to defend. Hey, this produces the wrong answer. Pretty easy to defend. Drive toward accepted standards and best practices. We've mentioned the CPP core guidelines here. Many companies will have internal coding policies, internal standards they have to meet. You know, anytime you can just directly quote one of them, hey, you know, the best practice in the CPP core guidelines states X. We're doing Y here, let's change it. You know, again, that's pretty easy to defend. Driving toward the team standards, which gets back to building up that wiki page. Again, easy to defend. If you cannot find a defensible reason to choose one alternative or the other, there may not be one. There's a lot of issues in the software engineering field that fall into this. Hang on just a second while I look up a book. It popped into my head. Yeah, so I'm going to recommend a book here. It's called The Problem with Software: Why Smart Engineers Write Bad Code. It's by Adam Barr. In this particular book, he takes a look at the software engineering as an industry as compared to other industries, say physics, for instance. And one of the central theses of the book is, in the software world, we really don't have a lot of hardcore research, experimentally proven reasons, or research-driven, experimentally proven reasons why we do things. We tend to do things because, well, we've always done them this way. This worked for me for the past 5 years, so I'm going to keep doing it that way. And of course, when you get that scenario, it's easy to get two people that do it differently. If you can't find a good reason to do one or the other, just pick one and move on. It's probably not going to come back and bite you. If it does, then you've learned which way to do it. You write it down on your team standards, and you won't do it again. Another rule that I found very helpful: unclear comments and variable names. Those issues always go to the reader. So I've had a couple of, well, it's reasonably common. You'll have a variable name. The reviewer will say, hey, this doesn't make sense to me. The developer will say, oh, it makes perfect sense to me because blah, 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 for whatever reason. Almost always, those go to the reader. I'm trying to think of a case where it didn't, and I can't. So tempted to say always goes to the reader. If you have more than one code reviewer, then the easy thing to do is just bring in a third person and say, hey, does this make sense to you? You know, if two readers don't understand it, that's a no-brainer. Change it. that puts those issues to bed really, really fast. And by the way, the reader should suggest a variable name or what they would like to see in the comment. Another point to that one. Okay, questions? Okay, so in summary, code reviews are an integral part of being a professional developer and crafting quality code. I think we all pretty much know that. Do we do it? Not always. Automate as much as you can, especially the easy stuff like syntax and linting. The code review needs to be part of the team culture, not just something you do. The team has to embrace and participate in the code reviews. If you can hire a team to match that culture, go for it. And then managing conflict quickly and professionally, that keeps people's feelings from getting hurt and keeps it balanced. One other point I want to make on that, some teams will have people who are quite dominant and some people who are much more passive. If you're managing a code review process, or the team for that matter, it's very beneficial to pay extra attention to the quiet people and help draw them out. If you've ever run a team, most managers will know this. But drawing those people, drawing the quiet ones out, really helps balance the team dynamic. And you'll see that in the code reviews as well. Any final questions? Okay, that's all I've got for this one, folks.
I have something.
Uh-huh.
This is Bob Goddard. One of the alternatives that I've seen in the literature and have actually used to doing formal code reviews is something called pair coding, where as you're coding, there's one person with his fingers on the keyboard and another person looking over his shoulder at the time. Yep. And what happens then is that you actually you basically do your code review as you're coding.
Yeah, I've actually done that a little bit, and frankly, not as much as I would have liked to. I personally find that a fun way to code. The one thing I've run into a couple of times with that is the person who's not doing the coding, the person who's doing the reviewing. And I say this as that person. It's sometimes hard to keep your focus, and it's easy to wander off and be thinking about other things.
Oh, it's hard to keep the person who's looking over your shoulder, hard to keep them on board. It's true. Yeah. And in particular, the code review is hard for if you have small teams. I mean, I've had teams where I'm the only full-time person on the team, and I've got two other people at 50% or 30% of their time, and yet we're trying to produce high-quality code. Yeah. And that makes it hard to get quality out of a team.
The other one, especially if you're on a small team, and I didn't mention this because it's about half the time I end up being an individual coder as well.
Yeah, me too.
I'll do a self-code review, and the way I typically do that is I will spend an afternoon coding, and then I will go away, and the first thing I do in the morning is review the code that I wrote last night. And I find that gives me a bit better perspective on it. And I very regularly will catch things. As a matter of fact, I'll actually catch things other code reviewers won't because I have a little bit more in-depth knowledge of the code. The other trick is if you can do it over a weekend, that really works well. So it's back away from the code, let yourself forget what you thought you were doing, and come back and read what you actually did. If that's the best you can do, it works.
I can echo that. Just come back tomorrow morning and review the code and I always find things really, really good things, valuable things to change or fix.
Yeah.
So that's a very good tip. Another comment I want to add is that again about the team dynamics for reviewing is when someone sends out a code review request, you want to be reasonably prompt in reviewing it, because the other person don't want to wait for 3 days before it goes in, right? So you want to even at a reasonable sacrifice, if you will, put down the things you're currently working on and help the teammate review the code that is what they decide is ready to go in, right? So that helps the team dynamics.
That's a really good point, because I've run into that one quite frequently as well. I've run into teams and individuals who adopt the practice of, if I have a code review pending that somebody's waiting on me for, that code review will be done before I do my own coding. I've seen that approach, and I've seen it work. Sometimes it ends up in priority issues. Then, of course, there's always the nag approach, which is, that just gets annoying. Could you do my code review, please? And yeah, so that's a good point. That a policy toward that should be part of the team culture. It's a really good point.
Yeah, and another. Go ahead.
I was just going to comment this. Someone in the chat board has a question for you. Elon is asking, what do you think about commenting on code that wasn't changed in the current change list? Many times people miss, code that they should have changed. That's my addition to that, to what the question was.
Oh, that's a really good one. So I've run across, and matter of fact, I found this to be a controversial issue. Now that you bring it up, I think that should be a team policy, and it should be very clear as to what you want to do. So in the cases where I've been working lately, which is aerospace, this is mission critical code. If there's something that a code reviewer finds that's incorrect, that needs obvious improvement, it needs to get commented on, regardless of whether it was touched or not. Literally somebody's life could be on the line because of a piece of code. That's a no-brainer. Fix the code. When I was working in game development, basically the guideline there was, don't touch anything that hasn't been touched, and any change make as quickly and lightly as possible. And the primary goal there was speed. If the video game does something a little weird or it crashes, well, okay, that's bad, but it's not as bad as mission critical code failing. So it depends on the domain you're working in, and the team culture, and essentially the desire of the manager to a certain degree. But no matter how you do it, it should be it should be stated. This is the way we're going to handle this, and be a policy.
Well, a middle ground to that, if I may comment on that,
yeah, go for it.
Is that if it really is not the code changer's problem, it is like just in the code area, but not really part of this change.
Yeah.
You could simply say, well, resolve this comment as a bug that I've filed, and we can fix this in a later comment. We don't want to intermix this particular commit with some unrelated bug fix, right?
Yeah, and that's a good point as well. And that's actually one of the common ways we do that is open a new ticket. Again, it goes to the severity of what you found and how related it is. But yeah, it's, you know, take that one up on a case-by-case basis. I'm not sure I can give you just a general guideline for the way to do those. You know, the other one is white space. Let me just take that one right to the edge. You know, if your white space is off, do you fix it? You know, some people say yes, absolutely. Some people say absolutely not. That says hot of the potato is where do I put my curly brace?
Hey, Lloyd, this is Chris. I wanted to affirm what you previously had said on making a separate bug to make changes, because otherwise you end up into a rabbit hole type of thing. You just keep digging and digging and digging, and you'll never get done with your changes. And pretty soon your change is no longer at all what the original purpose of your code change was. They should be small and modular and self-defining. And if it's different than what the bug was or the task, it's a different task.
Yeah, exactly. It needs, whatever you do needs to stay within the scope of the bug that you're working in, or the task that you're working in. Yeah.
Ethan has a hand raised.
Oh, go for it.
Yeah, just had a question. I guess to your opinion on if, for whatever reason, a project, the majority of the bugs are maybe extremely small, like maybe a lot of off by one errors and less than this or changes. Is there some opinion on maybe trying to batch those into one big code review? Because I've been trying to get code reviews going, and sometimes it feels a little silly to do a code review on a single character change or something.
So I've seen this handled both ways. My preference is if I've got a handful of things that are all like, you know, a one-line change, and they're all kind of related, you know, nitpicky code changes stuff. My preference is I tend to like to batch them. I've worked with people who, even during a main code review or a main task, will put, you know, 1 and 2 line changes into an individual commit within the code review because it makes it more modular. Both work. It's a style thing as far as I'm concerned. Figure out what your team wants to do and go with it. They both work. They both have their pitfalls. Yeah, I don't know there's a real solid way to address that one.
Okay, thank you.
I have another comment about a small trick, but that is often overlooked. But the trick really makes the code reviewer's life a lot easier, which is when you're making some change. Let's say you're doing a refactoring, right? So you're moving some code from one place to another, and then you're modifying it. I find it very beneficial to have a single commit that does just the move and nothing else, or a single commit that does just variable renames or style changes, and basically make it a uninteresting commit that reviewers can simply, or you can even state that there's no behavior change here, don't need to look at it. And then in the next commit, you make your real change there, and don't squash them two together. And in the code review, you make one single iteration that shows the actual change. And that usually makes the code reviewer's life a lot easier.
Yep, completely agree with that one. And one thing I've run into, and this is particular to Git, the source code management system. Git, there's some settings in there, and I've run across it in one place, and I don't remember exactly what the scenario was. When you moved a file and changed it, sometimes it would detect it as a move. Sometimes it would detect it as a delete and a replace. And I've also seen it where it detects it as a delete and a brand new file. And in that latter case, it's darn near impossible to know what the person's intent was. And it essentially has to do with how different the two files end up being. There's some threshold where it'll show up differently depending on how different the files are. And to your point, the way to deal with that is specifically one commit for the move, one commit for the changes, and then the problem just goes away.
Yeah, and I would extend that to beyond code review and keep that in your code history. So
yeah,
2 months or 2 years later, when you're revisiting this change, you still have the benefit of, I can clearly see what changed.
Exactly, yeah. Yep, exactly. Good points. Hey, I'm going to pop back up for a second. I noticed Peter Williamson has a question up here that got missed in the chat. What happens when team members don't see the benefit of code reviews? So this is an interesting one. I don't know. I've never run into this in a soft enough case where I've been able to actually like convert somebody. But what I'm going to talk about an interesting story where we're getting them. You know, I could do another one of these talks on writing unit tests because it's another one of these same types of behaviors. When you start getting people to write unit tests and they start finding their own errors, that usually convinces them that writing unit tests is a good idea. The problem with code reviews is it's somebody else finding their errors. So there's an embarrassment factor that goes into it as well. So not only are they seeing, hey, my life would be simpler if I didn't have to do this code review. It's, oh, gee, because I did this code review, somebody found it, and now I look bad. Well, one, you don't want them to look bad. It's just, you made a mistake. Not a big deal. Forget it. Just fix it. I think the approach I would try and take is, if I've got somebody who's really not seeing the benefit of code reviews, try to punch down on the educational aspect more. Not necessarily here's a mistakes and things like that, but here's a way you can learn to be a better developer and see if that helps. I don't know, does that kind of answer your question for you, Peter? Or are you still here? Yep, okay.
I have another comment. There's a military concept that military officers are taught, and it's called completed staff work, which is a junior staff is always called upon to review what a military team is doing and to report to his superiors on that. And there's a way to do that and a way not to do that. And the way to do it is to do completed staff work, which means that you not only point out the problem, but you point out the solution and go a reasonable several steps down the road of actually at least indicating how the solution looks and how it will work, if not actually presenting a solution. I mean, yeah. Ideally, you present the solution, not just criticize what the team or your superior officer is doing. And I do a lot of my work in the military culture, and I come from a military family, and this is an interesting way to think about what a junior person does to correct a senior person and how they can do it sensitively and effectively.
Yeah, I like that. Good.
Completed.
Oh, right. So I've got another question on the chat. How do you encourage people to? How do you encourage shy people to participate in code reviews? That's kind of the same thing as how do you draw out the shy people in your team and get them to engage at all? Basically, trying to think about the most effective ways I've seen them and have done this. You don't want to necessarily put them on the spot. Usually a shy person, if you put them on the spot, that makes them kind of pull back. if you can kind of get them to a point where they're a little bit excited about what they found, or if they can kind of, if they found something that is kind of a big deal, let them know it's a big deal, and maybe even kind of like, off to the side, even before you've got a paradigm to let this happen. Let them know ahead of time, hey, we're going into this code review. I know you found this thing. I'd like you to, present it so they're not, they've got time to think about how they want to do it. And then kind of play it up so they get some self-confidence around that. And see if that helps. It kind of really depends on why they're shy, I think. One person I worked with, I thought was incredibly shy at one point. He was very soft-spoken. Turned out he was not that shy at all when something really got into it. He actually found a very critical issue and had no problem at all telling the director, this is not going forward. So you kind of have to ask the question, why are they shy, and see if you can work around that. It's kind of more of a psychological answer than a technical one. Does that help?
Roxanne was being shy. She's not answering.
I noticed.
Yes, yeah, that helped. I don't know if you can hear me.
I've never known you to be shy.
Okay, we've drawn her out. She's gone from chatting to talking. Good. No. Go ahead. Oops, now she stopped talking. That's okay. Come on back. Okay, other questions? Comments? Okay, well, I think we'll call it a wrap then, folks. Thanks everyone for attending, and go ahead and stop the recording at this point. Let's see. Is Zen still here? Oh, can you mention the book by Adam Barr? Yes. Let me pull that up again. Okay, the title is The Problem with Software: Why Smart Engineers Write Bad Code. Okay, thanks everyone, and I'm going to, not sure if Zen is still here or not. I don't see him. Anyway, when we all exit, oh wait a minute, there you are.
Yeah, I'm
You're
here.
still here. There you are. I just didn't see you. Yep. Oh, and there goes. Okay, we're done recording. We're off the clock now, everybody. We can all say crazy stuff. So.